Okay, good morning everyone. So today I'm going to talk about procedures of English material development. Before we start, let me introduce myself. My name is Asyifa and my student number is 39. So in developing material, there are steps. The first one will be selecting, the second one is grading, the third one is adapting, and then designing, and the last one is evaluating. So let's get started in the first step, which is selecting materials. So selecting materials basically means to choose content that matches learners' needs, language skills, and the teaching context. Brown in 1995 emphasized that selecting materials that are relevant, appropriate, and practical while considering the author's credibility and the material's adaptability to the teaching context. And Little John also observes that the use of a set of material need to be able to examine whether or not the methodology and content is appropriate to the student's, teacher, and classroom for a particular language teaching context. So basically, when we select materials for our syllabus or curriculum, there are so many considerations. Is it is it match the learner's needs, their language proficiency, and does it match the teaching context and the curriculum that we have made before? So the materials should coherent to students' needs and the objectives and the goals that the students have to achieve. And does it fit the teacher's requirements? Okay, let's move on to the... So for example, imagine if you are teaching English to high school students preparing for international exams like TOEFL or IELTS, and you would select textbooks that include materials that can support the student's need, which is international exams. So you can choose include textbook that include academic English and exam specific skills, or the textbook that feature listening, speaking, reading, and writing tasks that will support those skills and can help students to practice those skills that are needed in the international exams like TOEFL or IELTS. And then the textbook should also published by reputable institutions, so students will get familiar with texts that are very similar with the real ones. And then the last one, textbook is aligned with the curriculum's focus on academic and test-related language. So these materials are all related to the goals and needs of the students. Okay, now we're moving on to the case study in selecting materials. So in a vocational high school in Surakarta, Indonesia, Ramawati conducted a study where the teacher began the material development process by identifying and exploring the students' needs. This initial step was crucial in selecting appropriate materials that align with the learner's requirements and the curriculum goals. And the result of the study, the needs analysis revealed that students required materials that were contextually relevant to their vocational studies. This informed the selection of materials that were more engaging and applicable to their future careers, leading to increased student motivation and participation. So based on this study, or based on this case study, that we can learn that selecting materials have to be aligned with the student's need. Because when we are choosing materials, there has to be a needs analysis to be done, so we can know the students' need and their proficiency, and then we can select the materials that can fulfill their needs. Now, once the suitable materials are selected, the next step is to grade them, to grade the materials for learners at different proficiency levels. So based on Noonan in 1991, suggests that grading should consider linguistic difficulty, cognitive complexity, and semantic sequencing to maintain coherence. So basically, grading refers to the way in which the content is organized in the syllabus or coursebook, involving the ordering of items and the speed which the students progress through the course. So basically, grading involves organizing learning content in a logical progression from simple to complex, and so these allow learners to build on prior knowledge systematically. So let's get into the example so we can have a more understanding about how important grading materials is. So for example, a teacher developing a speaking course for beginner adults may grade topics as follow. The first one is self-introduction, like simple vocabulary and present tense, and then we move on to the next level. After knowing the simple vocabulary, we can move on to the next level, which is daily routines using the simple present and frequency adverbs, and then moving on to the next level, which is describing people, introducing adjectives and comparative forms, and the last next level, which will be talking about past experiences, where we introduce the simple past. So in grading materials, it is important to know the knowledge of the students. Students cannot be taught straight to the harder level unless they already have prior knowledge about English. So if the students have no prior knowledge about English, we should start from the bottom, from the basic, For example, maybe the alphabet, and then after they know the alphabet, they can move to simple words like nouns and then verbs, and then like that. So moving on to the case study. So Prativi developed English reading materials for grade 9 students in a Fashion Design vocational program. The materials were structured using Jolie and Bolito's model, which includes needs analysis, materials development, evaluation, and revision. And the result is the grading of materials was tailored to the students' proficiency levels and received a mean score of 3.49 in exact and expert evaluations, categorized as very good, indicating that the grading effectively matched the learner's needs and abilities. So it is important to grade our materials so it can also benefit the students and can be impactful to students. So if we choose after we choose the perfect materials that match the students' need, we also need to grade them so the students can learn properly and systematically and logically, and that will be and the materials and the whole learning process will be more effective if we choose the perfect material and grade them systematically based on the students' knowledge and skills. Okay, now after grading, the next challenge is adapting materials to better fit the teaching context. So adapting basically involves modifying existing materials to better fit specific context or learner needs, which may include adding, omitting, reorganizing content, addressing omissions, modifying, and extending tasks. Cunningsworth mentioned in his book that we also need to be aware of what they find difficult and what they find easy, so as able to adapt materials in a way that makes them challenging linguistically and stimulating in their content without being too difficult or too user friendly. In order to do this effectively, we need a good understanding of the nature of the materials that we are adapting and experience of working in the learning or teaching situation which we are adapting the materials for. So when we adapt materials, we modify existing materials, and what is important that we have to know the materials we are adopted before we do modifying process, like reorganizing, addressing, modifying, extending, adding on, omitting, like that. So the materials can be more effective and meet the needs of students. Okay, so for example, when a teacher is using a British English textbook in an American English context, so that there will be difference between British English and American English. So there will be modifying or adapting materials. For example, like addition inserts supplementary vocabulary list with American equivalents. For example, like in British they say flat, but in American they said apartment. And these these kinds of vocabs, different vocabs between British and Americans need to be thought, need to be adapted, need to be added when we are teaching the American students or in the American schools. And the second one is omission. Skip sections that focusing on British culture references that might confuse learners. So we can omit part of the materials that are not needed. For example, like that, we can omit materials that are focusing on British cultural references because this can cause confusion in American students. And the last one, there is modification, change listening tasks to include American accents instead of British ones, because there is a distinguished accents between the British and Americans, and for Americans it is better to teach them in their native or local accent that are more familiar to them. And also the case study for adapting materials, Rahmawati discussed the importance of adapting ELT materials to fit specific teaching context. The study emphasized evaluating existing materials and making necessary adjustment to better suit learners' need. And the result of this study, by adapting materials, teachers were able to address gaps between the textbook content and the students' real-life language use, leading to more effective learning experiences and improved language skills. So there will be gaps between real-life situation and the material and the textbook. So by adapting materials, we can add a more relatable content. We can add more relatable materials for students that can relate to their real life experience, like that. Now, but sometimes it is better to design entirely new materials rather than adapting the existing one. So after we adapting materials, we can also build a whole new materials from the basic, from zero. So here we are in the next step, which is designing materials. So designing materials involves creating new content tailored to specific learner needs, context, or teaching goals. So it is important when we are making a syllabus or a curriculum to know what the students need. We need to do conduct a needs analysis and then we can make and choose or design a perfect syllabus, and then resulting an easier process of designing materials. After we know what is the purpose, what is the goals, what is the aims, what is the objectives, and what is the student's need. So Graves said it outlines that designing materials require needs analysis, curriculum alignment, content creation, and iterative testing. So yeah, basically, if we want to make a good materials or designing new materials, make a perfect materials, it is important to conduct a needs analysis, because the result of our analysis will be the base or the formation of our curriculum, syllabus, and also materials. So, for example, if we are building a material or designing a material, after we know the needs of the students, for example, a teacher designing a curriculum for intermediate learners in a tourism program. So here we have two infos that the curriculum are built for intermediate learners, so they have prior knowledge about English, maybe basic knowledge about English, and the second one, it is specifically for a tourism program. So after we know this info, we can build a material that maybe include role play for hotel check-ins, because it is related to tourism program, and the second one, dialogues about local tourists and attraction, and the third one is vocabulary lists related to booking, cancellations, and guest complaints, and the fourth one is authentic materials like brochures and reservation forms, like that. And in a case study, Harsono highlighted the process of designing and developing EFL learning materials that reflect new context and goals. The study involved reviewing literature and materials development and applying principles to create contextually appropriate materials. So the design materials were better aligned with the learner's cultural and educational context, resulting in increased relevance and effectiveness in language instruction. Now, after we make or designing the materials, it is important to conduct an evaluation. So the last step will be evaluating materials. So evaluating materials basically involves assessing their effectiveness and suitability for teaching and learning context, and usually through feedback and performance data. So evaluation is important, so the materials can be developed, can be improved better, and can fulfill the students' needs better in the future, because students will be, and the people and the world are also growing and developing, and the material should be evaluated to keep up with the improvement and development of people, or basically the students. So, for example, after using a new speaking textbook for a semester, the teacher should conduct an evaluation. In a pre-use evaluation, the teacher should analyze if the book's themes align with the syllabus. And the second one, while using the materials, the teacher should observe student engagement during tasks and collect their opinions. And if the materials that are used are not do not match the students, or the teacher should do some adjustment that can fit the student needs. And the last one is post-use. Analyze test scores and gathers feedback to determine the book's effectiveness, and do judgment and give judgments towards the material or the textbook. Does it really effective? Is it really effective? Basically, asking questions regarding the effectiveness of the materials and be critical about